Hey, Brunch with Brian. Here we are, and today it's actually Notary Public Day. It's National Notary Public Day. So uh, how do we use Notary Republics? Okay, I'm going to be kind of, uh, let's get to some basic stuff. Nothing too massively inspirational today. Let's get to some nitty gritty training on Notary Public. So you can become a Notary Public if you want. You can't do your own deals. You need a notary public to do certain pieces of paperwork. However, on your initial deal meeting with sellers, there's nothing that needs to be notarized. I'll tell you, back in the day, there were appointments where I would bring a notary with me, but that was back before we did a secondary closing. So when we started, it was like the Wild Wild West out there. And I was preparing all my own deeds, and I was actually going, basically the way we used notary publics in the beginning is we'd go out to their seller's house and we'd have all the paperwork there. They'd sign the entire package, it's about 10 different forms. And then and then I'd say, okay, now we're going to go over to the bank. We have some premier checking at Bank of America, and so we can use notaries for free all the time. So we would say, come follow us over to Bank of America. And they would come drive behind us. And when we got to the bank, we'd go in there and the notary public would witness their signature on the deed paperwork. And then we'd go and get and record the deed. So, I mean, we didn't even use a title company for closings. This was just seller financing or subject to deals. So there was no mortgages involved. Basically, we just needed to make sure the deed got transferred properly. And so I got good at reading these deeds and I figured out, how to write them. It's not complicated. And then, I don't know. Let me stop right there and say, don't ever do that. Okay. So don't ever do what I just said. That was back in the day. It was less litigious. I'm kind of surprised nobody ever sued me. But everything always went pretty well, and I always did a good job of explaining the deal completely and not hiding anything, and so I never got in trouble. We have one student who got in so much trouble he had to pay a whole bunch of money, like $20,000. I shouldn't even tell you this, but it was one very weird student who made a lot of mistakes and is kind of like not very, up and up. And I know you guys are, but he was doing some crazy stuff. And, he ended up not even getting, losing a bunch of money getting sued, but having to spend a bunch of money to try to save his social media reputation. Someday I'll tell you who that is. But I'll tell you that if you actually focus on things properly in trouble, nobody ever sues you. You never have to worry about your social media, and we've never had a problem with it. So that's because we do things right, and make sure we never make any promises we can't keep. Now with the notary, how notaries are going to play into your life is basically not really, okay, mostly. The paperwork that you need to get notarized between you and the seller, there is a seller acknowledgments form, seller acknowledgments. And these are a bunch of legal phrases like you understand. I mean, it's stuff like, you're of sound mind and body. You're not, under the influence of drugs. You understand what the words mean. You can read English. So a lot of it is real basic stuff. But then it says you understand that what the deal is and all that. So they basically sign it, and that's something that we get notarized because it's a pretty legal document. They're acknowledging all these legal things. Okay, so that's one document, and then the other one is the deed. When the deed is signed over to you, it has to be notarized. So those are the main two pieces of paper with the seller that have to get notarized. Okay, now we don't have any paperwork with lease purchase buyers that have to get notarized in terms of deed. There's no deed transferring there or anything like that. What's happening there is we do want a buyer acknowledgments. Okay, this is just a super CYA, cover your assets, protect yourself. That's what these acknowledgement forms are. They're kind of long and they're a little bit scary. They have to initial every single item on there. So it's like they have to go down and initial everything and then sign at the bottom, and then it gets notarized. So it feels pretty legal. I don't want you filling out that document in the house with the seller or the buyer. Now again, that's supposed to be at a secondary closing. Now, you'll be tempted to not necessarily do a secondary attorney or title company closing with your buyer because there's no deed that has to be done, nothing like that, but there is this one piece of paper which is called the buyer. It's called tenant buyer acknowledgments. Oh, what's it called? It's the acknowledgement form for the buyer. So they have got to sign that and notarize it if you want to be the most protected. Now, we've operated for years and years, you know, over almost 20 years not using that document before we started to use it. So again, it's going to protect you a little better, and so it's not a bad idea to get it done. And whenever you're collecting a big amount of money from your buyer, your non-refundable option deposit from your tenant buyer, your lease purchase tenant buyer, if you're collecting that, then it's better to be safe because they could come back and say, I didn't understand when I gave you the 20,000 that wasn't refundable. Even though you tell them non-refundable, even though it's all over the paperwork that it's non-refundable, they might, have an issue later, especially if you don't handle it professionally. And if they go up in front of a judge and say, well, they met me at a Starbucks and I gave them $20,000 in a cashier's check and I never saw them again. I mean, if they hear a story like that, the judge is going to think twice. But if they say, oh no, I signed at an attorney or a title company, they went through the documents, everything was explained and here it's notarized. You can't just get out of a document because you say, I made a mistake or I wasn't thinking right. I mean, if it's notarized and everything, that's a legal binding document when they signed it. So they can't just say, hey, I didn't mean it, and get out of it. Now, if you want to be nice and give people a little bit of their non-refundable option deposit back, that's up to you. We generally don't, and generally they don't ask because they understand that this was non-refundable from the beginning. So you don't really bring notaries around. Now, what if you're doing deals at a distance virtually? Well, that you have to set up some kind of a signing appointment virtually at a title company or an attorney's office. Usually, especially distantly, it's kind of easier to find a title company that's cooperative and can pull title for you and do the signings than an attorney. But an attorney is a first choice because they're offer a little more protection for you probably in most cases, but you got to find an attorney who understands what we do. So your first question, if you're calling some attorney at a distance to set up a closing, buyer or seller, you're going to say, do you work with investors? And then if they say yes, do you do signings for investors? If they say yes, then you say, well, do you do signings on creative financing, seller financing deals, or lease options? The two things I want you to mention, don't say subject to, because if you say subject to, they're going to flee for the hills. Say, do you work with investors, number one? Do you do signings for investors? If they say yes, say, well, great. Do you also work with seller financed deals or lease purchases? And if they say, oh, I'm used to those, I do deals on that all the time, and do you need help with the paperwork? And you don't need help with the paperwork, you just got to make sure that they know how to do that kind of deal and they're okay with it. Some sellers, for whatever reason, they only want to do straight up mortgage transactions. They don't like the seller financing. That's fine. You just got to find the right one. That's why title companies are sometimes easier because they'll pretty much close whatever you put in front of them. Okay, so started off with Notary Republic. I kind of told you a little bit about how we used to use them, but you just want to be smart about your procedures. You got to get your little procedures in place the first time, and so be smart about signings. And so it used to be I would bring a notary with me. Sometimes I'd send a notary out to do some notarization of documents, and we'd be on the virtual phone, but usually guys just have the title company or the attorney, anything that has to be, and I basically told you all the documents that need to be notarized. Just send them over to a title company or an attorney to get that stuff notarized. All right, so I am smart about my procedures. That's what it is. This is sort of one of those procedures that you have to do. And I'm smart about steps. Now, how are you going to know what step would you ever need a notary, or what step is the secondary closing? It's all in the step-by-step checklists in your what to do manual. So just follow those no matter what kind of deal you're doing. Every one of them spells out every single little step, so you're never going to miss anything. You're never going to accidentally forget to get something notarized or order title. Okay, so I'm smart about steps. Let's do that for our affirmation. Ready? I'm smart about steps. 1, 2, 3. I'm smart about steps. I'm smart about steps. I'm smart about steps. Yeah, and guys, how are you smart about steps? Just follow the steps in the what to do manual, including the steps for your quick start daily plan. Now, in about less than 2 weeks, you're going to be at the Taking Action workshop, so make sure this is on your schedule, on your calendar for the 18th, November 18th, Friday. A lot of things are popping off here at the end of the year and going into next year. I really want you to be ready to have the best year of your life in 2023 and still get a couple more deals done this year. So you got to be at this November 18th event for Taking Action workshop. It's essentially free. It's normally $14.97, but you can come for $1. Just go to homeinvestingacademy.com and order it there for $1. Homeinvestingacademy.com will give you a really cool free prize. So I want to see you there. It's going to be a Zoom deal, so we're going to be, looking at you. You can ask questions. We're going to have a lot of interaction, and so make sure you don't miss that incredible training. All right, let's do our deep breathing. Nice deep breath in. And always a big smile. Wow, the air smells really fresh today. Deep breath in. Nice fresh air. Deep in your lungs. Oh, that's great. Awesome. Okay, what a great way to start your day. Keep your day going. Staying positive, keeping your affirmations. Remember, you can repeat your own affirmations. I want you making up affirmations throughout the day, saying them out loud with confidence. I love affirmations. So until I see you guys next, I can't see my screen with my sunglasses. Until I see you guys next, keep expecting success, getting awesome training, and taking action.